Welcome, everybody, to another interview special. Justin Peach from the Second Tier podcast at a very, very key time of the season. Justin, do you kind of view this block of games now as where things are going to become very clear? Or do you think if we sat here at FA Cup third round weekend, we'd be as unwise as we're probably going to be in this discussion right now?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think if you go back to last season, I think you had Leeds sitting in third and there was Sheffield United and Sunderland in the top two. And then you sort of break away a little bit. You start to get hampered by injuries. It's a lot of games. Off the top of my head, it's like 11 games in 8 or 9 weeks.
45 days.
Yeah, it's a tricky period, and you are right. It is such a key period. It's why it's being tricky because ultimately you've got this is a make or break scenario for a lot of clubs in terms of trying to fulfil their aspirations. You can get dragged into a relegation battle if you don't pick up enough points over Christmas, just because the sheer amount of games that are played. And obviously, if you've got small squads, you get to mid-December. It's a hairy period.
Well, and you'd say it's a make or break season. If you accept the premise that there's a bit of an open door being left by all the four parachute teams, that door can be closed if the teams, and it's less about the parachute teams, it's more about the the likes of a Preston, Hull or Millwall just keeping churning it out. So it is on them as much as we expect the parachute teams to come strong eventually.
Yeah, well, you say eventually. I think that just adds a lot of pressure. Southampton are yet to appoint a new manager, so that gives me some indication that maybe I wouldn't say the writing off the season because you can't do that in the Championship, but it's going to be difficult catching the top two. But Ipswich are going to be right in there, despite being, at the time of recording, try and do the maths in my head, 9 points off Coventry, top place. It's going to be
11.
11. There we go. Don't make me do math. It's going to be a run of games.
I'm just saving you from the Coventry fans, mate.
No one can save you from Coventry fans. Let's be honest. The Frank Lampard stuff, that's burnt a bridge. But yeah, with the parachute payment teams, I'm only seeing Ipswich have a really, really good shot of getting into that top two over the next 8 or 9 weeks. It's hard to see the other teams getting in there.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you also agree that Coventry are this is how I see it anyway. Coventry are the standout team and they've given themselves such a good margin for error that even if they go for, I would categorise them as extremely good. Even if they go to very good or good, they just need to do that for another couple of months and they're going to be in such a strong position. I happen to think the other position is far more open. How do you see Middlesbrough essentially being forced to change manager at a very inopportune moment, affecting that automatic race?
I'm not a big Rob Edwards fan, and I think the change of manager is going to do them a lot more good than it would harm. I know Rob Edwards. What he did when he came in, he fixed a lot of the Michael Carrick wrongs. In that you've got a good defensive structure now, and there's solid game management. But going forwards, things were drying up a lot. Whereas if you're to believe the reports and the work permits coming in, Kim Hellberg's coming in. He's the hipster choice, but he's a lot more expansive. He likes his teams to press. He likes his teams to play through the middle, central areas. And I think that could suit this Borough team a lot better than Rob Edwards' ball, which was essentially get it into the wide areas and cross the ball. So I think that's going to suit Middlesbrough, and that might prop them up. But ultimately, there's going to be teams behind them that are going to fancy. You got Ipswich, who are going to be in their Hull, don't look like stopping. So there's a lot of variables there for Borough to contend with.
If you could pick one of the four teams in the playoff spots, it's fairly easy to make an argument for Ipswich with the squad and the manager and the status as a year one parachute team. But they're an interesting bunch: Stoke, Preston, Hull, and Millwall. If you could, if you had to back one of those and ride on that horse to challenge automatic, who do you like out of those particular four?
Hull are interesting. They're just very volatile, but they're so good going forwards. They're so interesting going forwards. But defensively, I don't know if that can last the season in terms of getting into the top two or maybe even sustaining a playoff place. Millwall are the ones that intrigue me the most out of all those teams, because I think they've got the better balanced squad. They're a bit further along the journey than Mark Robbins and Stoke, and obviously Preston and Paul Heckingbottom. But also with Alex Neil, he's got experience of getting his teams in a position of being a playoff contender, and also getting promoted with Norwich. So I think there's a lot of positives there. Stoke, I'm not gonna dwell too much on Preston, because it's hard to foresee them sustaining it because of their squad. But with Stoke, it's the Mark Robbins factor for me. I think they need a lot more depth in the forward areas, because if you get an injury to one or two in that final third, there's a problem. But again,
if you don't, Justin, Manhurst, Thomas and Mabama, it's very good, isn't it?
It is very good, and he's been very good up until now. But with Sorba Thomas, he's got a history of dropping off, being inconsistent. Manhoff, this is his most consistent season so far. So again, we don't have a lot of history to tell us whether he can last the entire campaign. But I think with Stoke, you've got to have a really, really lucky year in terms of injuries, I think, for them to be in that contention. But they've put themselves in a really good position because, again, they're built on solid foundations, as a Millwall, as a Middlesbrough, and that's a really good place to be.
Probably a terrible premise to go off, but assume Coventry and Middlesbrough end up being the top two. How many of Stoke, Preston, Hull and Millwall would stay in the playoff places? Because we can talk about the chasing pack in a minute, but you could see, I mean, you mentioned Preston, who've been outstandingly good at home. Hull, just a bit popcorny and box office for me, and mug me off trying to predict them every single week. You say about Millwall, but they always let me down at the end. I'm like, right, come on. I want to see Millwall playing at home first in a playoff semi-final, and it never quite happens. How many of those four that are in there now, could you see lasting the course and actually being in a playoff semi?
I think Millwall. I think Millwall. I fancied him before the season. We've not seen Mihajlo Ivanovic get going yet. No, he was a dark horse for top goal scorer this season. So I think if he can get a run of form going, because he's been impacted by injuries as well. If he can get a run of form going, I think they'll be very dangerous. Because again, Millwall are a side. Tristan Kramer has been brilliant at the back as well. Obviously, having to move to centre half, he's been superb. So Millwall are a team that I really do fancy lasting the course, and I think with, I mentioned Stoke with potential injuries, Preston, they've really impressed me. I really like Paul Heckingbottom, but I think it's going to come down to squad quality and squad depth with Preston, because despite their form being brilliant, still don't really rate their squad. It's just it's really, really harsh. It's a very average Championship squad, and that's, I think, putting it kindly. But they've been brilliant, and that's down to the genius of Paul Heckingbottom setting up a really difficult team to beat. But being a difficult team to beat doesn't get you in the playoffs. You've got to be a good team to get points on the board and win games.
I'm eager to come to Derby, so we'll strategically miss them out in this run. And I'm eager to talk about Leicester, actually, because we think 6 months of waiting, they're finally going to be going into a hearing, which they are going to contest. So we're probably not going to get a result of this for a while. I kind of predicted with Leicester that they would be in the top 6 at the point that they got the points deduction, and anywhere between 4 and 9 is kind of what you're hearing. So if you go right in the middle of that with 6 or 7, but they've been a bit flaky, haven't they, Leicester? So maybe that prediction of mine that a points deduction would drop them out of the playoffs and then they'd have to get back in, that's not looking a good prediction at the moment.
Well, my prediction was Leicester would finish in the top 6 even with a points deduction. I thought they'd get enough.
Yeah, I agree. Board. Yeah, I thought they'd get the deduction and then they'd find their way back in.
Yeah, no, it's been a strange year because. Or a strange few months in the Championship for Leicester, because I thought the quality of players that they've got, especially midfield, the likes of Oliver Skipp, who's come down to the Championship on loan and been one of the best midfielders in the league.
Oh, in Norwich, yeah.
Yeah, they've looked, even Harry Winks, just haven't looked anywhere near quality. They've been actually very average, and that's not good enough.
Not having the manager, do you think?
Well, this is it. I think Marty Cifuentes was a good pick, but he was the cheap pick. I mean, he had to pay half of his own compensation fee to take the job. So with Leicester, they've gone for a manager who was a bit of a risk, and things fell down a little bit at QPR. Obviously, he ended up leaving, but results weren't consistent enough. And maybe we're starting to see that with Leicester. But this is it's a big job at Leicester. It's a big job because there's big expectation, but unfortunately, there's a they spent a lot of money and not got a lot back, and that's the crux of it. And I think with their squad, I think we've all looked at it and gone, oh yeah, no, fancy that. But it's all square pegs round holes, I think, at Leicester, and that's the issue that Cifuentes is trying to solve, and he's still trying to solve. I mean, you go back to the first 4 or 5 games of the season, they're being bailed out by a 15-year-old. It's not good enough, is it?
If you follow the money, you'd be looking at Wrexham, Birmingham, and Ipswich. You've mentioned Ipswich, and I talk about Ipswich a lot on here, but Birmingham and Wrexham, I get the idea that Wrexham have got the longer, steadier improvement, admittedly from a lower base and far less hype than Birmingham had. But then Birmingham had those back-to-back 4-0 wins, and there was some. I mean, look, there's some signs of both of them clicking. But are they top 10 sides, or are they top 6 challengers?
I think Birmingham can be. They just need to improve their away form. That being said, I weirdly think they would have beat Middlesbrough before the international break if Rob Edwards was still in charge. Well, he was still in
Right,
charge
yeah,
at Borough.
I know what you mean, yeah.
I think it just created such an atmosphere and such a togetherness that you just cannot measure it. It's such an intangible. And I think that would have been another away win, and they'd been 3 points prettier and ahead of Ipswich in 7th. So, yeah, but that's not how football works. But I think Birmingham can be a top 10 team. It's just getting their away form sorted. But I think Chris Davis has started to find a blend, especially with his midfield pivot and Jay Stansfield and obviously Marvin Gooch as well in that final third. I think if you get that formula working, that's a really, really nice structure to play with. And I think we're finding that, especially those back-to-back 4-0 wins. With Wrexham, they're a side, I think, who can... They've actually really impressed me from September onwards because they've stopped conceding so many chances. They stopped conceding so many chances and still have been pretty nifty going forwards, and they're starting to get the best out of Kiefer Moore. And if you get the best out of Kiefer Moore, I'll be your best friend because I absolutely adore Big Keith.
Big Keith. I'll tell you a funny story about meeting him in Meadowhall when he was on loan at Rotherham. And then when I told him I was an Ipswich fan, the conversation turned pretty quickly. I don't think it's been treated very well by Ipswich. But anyway, the 2 more before I get to Derby. So you got Bristol City and Charlton in there. Obviously, Charlton trending up from League One. And like Wrexham, very hard to beat. And obviously, you have a very high-performing manager there over the last, over many years, really, with a couple of odd outlier periods. And then Bristol City fans constantly telling me it's just about the injuries, Ben. Once the injuries are back, it's a top 6 tilt again. Is it?
Ooh. They've become a bit volatile again. They've become streaky Bristol City, as we very well know them to be. They've gone on winning runs and a couple of poor runs as well already this season.
Was that a Lee Johnson callback, Justin?
It's a streaky Lee. It's a streaky Lee callback. Yeah. It's a niche championship reference.
Mate, come on! I'm the niche championship guy.
But I've really enjoyed what Gerhard Struber's done because he's essentially he's come in and put in this, if I wouldn't say heavy metal blueprint, but there's a lot there to like that wasn't there under Liam Manning. And it's
prog rock.
Yeah, prog rock. We'll go with that. I mean, he looks like a dad who loves prog rock. He's wearing his jeans and his
new metal, like early 2000. No,
bit of Creed. Yeah. We'll say that.
I was going with like Linkin Park. Anyway, sorry. Continue. I've hijacked you.
And the way he's found a blend with his team and the pressing and basically playing the channels, I've absolutely loved it. But injuries have really, really hampered their progress because at one point Zach Viner was playing central midfield, which
that's for a few games,
yeah, they did a decent job, but you don't need a centre half playing there. I think Bristol City fans are right. If they get Max Bird and Jason Knight back into that midfield, it changes the output massively because you've got a ball player and then you've got the engine. But until then,
Justin, quickly, the sheer irony of it. I remember doing the playoffs last year, and I think 4 of them, O'Leary, Bird, Knight, and Viner, all appeared in all 48 EFL games last. So
Yeah.
they've gone from having really good, steady injury-related stuff. Interesting that Liam Manning then went to Norwich and injuries completely went the other way for him. But we'll get to relegation in a second. Sorry, I completely trod all over you
No,
on
no,
Bristol
no.
City. Just can you finish your point and come on to Charlton for me?
Yeah, well, it's. I think it's hard to tell where Bristol City are with the injuries. I think if they get the players back, we can start to measure them. But with Charlton, we know what Nathan Jones can bring. He's going to make it very difficult for Charlton to beat. I think if they can start getting the forwards scoring a little bit more consistently, then sure, I think they can aim for the playoffs. I predicted Charlton to be not a dark horse, but one of the overperforming sides this season because of Nathan Jones, because of the recruitment, and they are overperforming because they've been brilliant.
Did you
So
think
far.
Birmingham and Wrexham distracted everybody from Charlton a little bit because they spent a fair bit of money as well in summer, so it's not a bad shout.
Yeah, spanking a few million on Charlie Kelman. It's not like a team coming up from League One, Wrexham and Birmingham aside. So they've really, I wouldn't say. Well, no, I think they have actually flexed the financial muscles in a normal climate where Birmingham and Wrexham aren't involved. So yeah, I think they've recruited really well, put together a squad that's perfect for Nathan Jones, and I think their limit is actually quite high this season.
Right, talk to me about Derby because you bloody love Derby, don't you? And to be fair, they're exactly where I predicted them to be right now, but they've done it in a way that when you get a prediction bob on and I don't know, with like an injury time goal or something. And you're like, yeah, I called that exactly as I expected. But I mean, maybe you can put it down to injuries at the start of the season. I think Eustace is just such a capable championship. There is no steadier pair of hands now you can give a championship job to other than he. And I don't know, it just feels like as the players have become more available, that it's gone how we thought it was going to go. I didn't foresee a 5-game win streak, and I think most people will have them beating Watford as well, and it go into 6. And where do you go with this? Carlton Morris is on fire, isn't he? Very clear. It's Eustace, large centre backs, good wing backs. Get it in there, be hard to beat. And there's a certain Eustace set of statistics that if you cover up the teams and the scoreline and you look at the match and where the ball's been and the chances and then, but that team won, you're like, that'll be Eustace managing that. But what's your take on Derby, how it's been and where it could go? You excited?
It's hard to get excited at the moment because I think we're still very early on in the process.
5 wins in a row. It's the most excitement-inducing run you can have.
I tell you what, yeah, but it's Derby. This is it. I believe Paul Warne went on a run of form last September, and everyone was like, "Okay, well then." And then he loses 10 games in a row, something ridiculous, and loses.
And you'll tell me, Justin, the Steve McLaren collapse from when they were second to miss the playoffs is one of the most spectacular in Championship history, isn't it?
Yeah. For all the wrong reasons. It's good to drop down to the trauma. Just throw it in there. But it's with Derby. It's the reason why I'm not excited on this 5-game winning run, and there'll be people going, "Well, you should be." But for the first 5-6 weeks of the season, I think Derby were the worst performing team in the division. And you are right, there are elements that impacted that. Injuries of new players that were signed. Owen Beck's still not played a minute of football for Derby yet, and obviously he arrived on loan from Liverpool in the summer. But there's been a change to 5 at the back or 3 at the back with wing backs, and that's really got the best out of certain individuals. But we've still got players to come back in. Lewis Travis has been injured, but he's got to find a way in. David Ozo, at the time of recording, picked up a thigh injury against Blackburn, so he might be injured. And he's been so pivotal in this 5-game winning run, in a pivot alongside Bobby Clark of all people. It was an enforced pivot because of availability in central midfield. But what John Eustace is doing is essentially there are just crosses going into the box. There are set pieces that are working in Derby's favour. There's a lot of work on things that were brilliant in 2008, and that is what getting the best out of Derby. And what I mean by that is the style of play. It's very just crosses in the box, headers, and I think there's been a shift stylistically, generally across the Championship, to that style of football this season, because there's been a lot of big number nines come in. And Derby, I think they're the blueprint of it so far.
Well, they have more than one by the looks of it as well, don't they, on the pitch at the same time? But, right, let's take it to relegation. I had an interesting comment. Comments are always interesting on YouTube, aren't they? But where I kind of read it and I was like, oh, stop disagreeing with me. And then as I thought about it, I was like, is that guy right? And he was saying, Ben, can you stop talking about the almost guarantee that Norwich and Sheffield United are just going to trend up and slowly move away? Because they might not, or at least one of them might not. And I'm sure you, like all of us, got egg on their face with Luton last season, where they've got the year one parachute, and it's just, how can you get relegated? And they did. But am I right to? Well, let me ask you two questions at once. Am I right to just assume that gravity will pull Norwich and Sheffield United, even if they're bad, pull them away? And what do you think, there only being 2 relegation places really to play for? What do you think that does to the race? Does that help or hinder? Who does that help or hinder?
I think that helps a lot of teams, but I think the teams that are down there, the Blackburn, Portsmouth, Oxfords, where the budgets aren't as strong, you start to panic a little bit. And I think that's why we've seen a prompt from Swansea to change manager from Alan Sheehan over the international break. So, yeah, I think let's not rule out Sheffield Wednesday. They just signed Liam Cooper. Come on, there's muscles to flex here. But I think with the other 2 relegation places, I think Norwich will start to climb the table. I do, because statistically they've been performing better than maybe the results have suggested, or they've been at least creating better chances than results have been suggested. I think Philippe Clement is actually a very shrewd appointment from them. A club who's made bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, despite spending a hell of a lot of money. So I think they will start to climb the table. With Sheffield United, when Chris Wilder came in, I was like, okay, so my prediction of them being third is still on, even after 6 games. But it's not picked up. And that's the problem. And I think Chris Wilder's itching to get to January to still be within touch of a lower mid-table finish at this rate. That's the problem. I mean, the loan players they've signed have barely made an impact at the club, and I'm expecting a big shift in individuals. But again, that's more disruption to a club that has already had a lot of disruption, has not coped well with it. So I think the other 2 places, if I was Oxford, Portsmouth, Blackburn, those 3 teams, and I'm looking at Sheffield United and Norwich, I'm still worrying a little bit, because even with these changes, I think they'll come for Sheffield United in January. I think they will just about get enough points on the board. But this is this period of games over the next few weeks. They've got to pick up points. They can't afford.
Well, I was just going to circle exactly back to that, because Luton did get a bounce. If you look at Luton's run going into, say, the last couple of games of last season, they were scoring loads of points, but they left it too late and got caught by the rising tide. Just one more before we go. It feels like Swansea removed Sheehan on the basis they were going to get Hellberg. So this could go really wrong. If they've done, I could be wrong about that. I could be totally wrong that it wasn't a sacking because they thought they had the replacement. But if it is, and now they've got a pivot before an 11-game run in 45 days and put in a manager, they'd almost have been better just running through it with Sheehan if they weren't going to get their preferred option. Do you think that's a possibility? And that could be a real problem for Swansea if they're scratching now to find another choice for manager.
That's a really good point I didn't consider. And I wish I'd have done this interview before we did our midweek show reviewing the decision, because that's a perfect way of summarising it. I think you are right.
I could be wrong about that.
But I don't think you are, because obviously they wanted... it was between Alan Sheehan and Kim Hellberg in the summer. And ultimately, I think Hellberg's gone, well, you should have picked me in the summer, lads, and stuck his middle finger up at them and gone to Borough, essentially. That's my...
I wish you would, looking at the table at the moment. Not stick the middle finger up, but you choose Borough, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously with wealth and resource as well, definitely.
Right.
And squad balance as well. But That's an interesting point, and obviously they've had to pivot quite quickly. Almost, it's essentially a 180 or even a 360. They've had to completely turn things around, and I know they've been linked with Vitor Matos, the former Liverpool coach, but again, he's inexperienced, and Swansea are in a precarious position where, you know, if you are expecting Norwich and Sheffield United to pick up, then you could find yourself being dragged into the bottom three battle, which you don't really want, especially with a squad that has looked fine defensively, but going forwards, absolutely atrocious. So there's a lot there for a coach to come in and have an impact on quite quickly, which isn't an easy thing, especially when you're going to get zero time on the training ground. I'd argue
Oh,
that,
absolutely. Yeah.
changing manager in this international break, the decision had to be done heading into the international break. So the new coach had a couple of weeks to work with the players, but now he's going to have minutes. So that's a very precarious position, but it's such a good point that you do raise.
There we go. Right. I think we've spoken about most of the league there. So apologies, Watford. I'll just say Imran loser. QPR, Richard Kone. Southampton we'll talk about more when they do hire a manager. But as you say, Justin, they might actually not, and Thundereka might see it through. Justin, great to speak to you. If you can imagine this picture of a romantic meal between myself and Mr. Peach, what was it, like a chicken skewer thing at Wembley at the playoff final? That would have been the last time we saw one another. Now look, I know it's a small world in Championship content, and probably most people here are aware of Justin and the Second Tier podcast. But do the necessary. Let's get the plug, and we'll put the collaborator feature so you can just hit subscribe down the bottom there while you're hearing the plug. But do the plug anyway for the wonderful Second Tier podcast.
Yeah, it's at Second Tier Pod, releasing 3 shows a week, and we've got a YouTube special every Wednesday now that Ryan puts together. So, yeah, definitely getting that. And obviously, all the socials you've probably seen us by now. Been around a long time. My hair's starting to go grey, and it wasn't when I started.
Look at my beard.
That's how long it's been.
Look at that.
That's how long it's been. But no, yeah, Second Tier Pod. Just give us a subscribe and enjoy.
And a fellow Championship enthusiast like myself, what could possibly go wrong? Get down there in the comments. Get any views on what Justin's had to say. I know we've gone kind of broad on everything, but hopefully that can include as many clubs. So get your views in and make sure you have subscribed to me. I think if we do the collaborator thing right, if you hit subscribe, it just subscribes to both. So what have you got to lose? Get involved. Hit the thumbs up and strap yourself in for 11 games in 45 days. The Championship winter is coming.